So a few weeks ago, the prosecution and the defense made their arguments in the Julian Assange extradition hearings in the UK, and the judge is supposed to give her final ruling on January 4th. And I believe there are going to be some action for Assange protests going on in DC and in London on the 3rd and the 4th, and I'll be posting about that on Twitter when I find the information. But if we lived in a sane world, there's only one way that this judge can rule that would make any sense, and that would be to deny this extradition request that the US government is making to extradite Julian Assange so that they can prosecute him for his role in publishing the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, which revealed U.S. war crimes in the longest wars in U.S. history. And that information was given to him by Chelsea Manning. I mean, just off the technicalities, just the way that the prosecution went about these entire proceedings should have the case thrown out. The U.S., the CIA, State Department, they were spying on Julian Assange the whole time he was in the embassy, spying on him outside the embassy, in the jails, listening into privileged phone calls between him and his lawyer, which again should just lead to a mistrial and getting the case thrown out off of technicalities. They denied him access to his lawyers before the extradition hearing started, so they couldn't even prepare a proper defense. At one time he requested a laptop so he can prepare for his defense. They gave him a laptop with the keyboards glued down or some shit like that, and the laptop wasn't working, so he couldn't even do his own research to prepare his own defense, on top of not being able to meet with his lawyers. So off of technicalities, a judge should throw this case out. But also on the merits of the case too, because he's being targeted, he's being prosecuted because he published information that embarrassed the U.S. government, that exposed the crimes of the U.S. government, and this is retaliation. What Julian Assange did is no different than what real journalists do time and time again. Some of the biggest stories in history that have been broken by journalists were documents stolen by their source and handed to them, and they published it. That's what Julian Assange did. He tried to help his source. He tried to protect his source like any journalist would do. And because of that, they're trying to charge him and prosecute him and have him extradited to face life in prison here in the United States if they don't try to assassinate and execute him before that. So on the merits, this case, like I said, this extradition hearing should be denied. And then also, the laws in the UK prevent them from extraditing someone to a country where they will be tortured or face the death penalty. And there's a real possibility if he does get extradited to the US, he will definitely be tortured. He's been tortured when he wasn't here, and the US government tortured Chelsea Manning, his source, over the very same case. So without a doubt, they get their hands on him, they're going to try to torture Julian Assange. They're going to put him in solitary confinement. They're going to do all types of cruel shit to him, beat him, probably assault him. Also, based on the exceptions to the extradition treaties, this case should be thrown out. But we don't live in a sane world. We live in an incredibly corrupt world where powerful governments break the law and do whatever they want all the time. That's how we even got to this place to begin with. Every step of the way was the U.S. government and our allies outright breaking the law or using the justice system as a tool to go after Julian Assange. The only reason why he's sitting in Belmarsh right now is because they illegally dragged him out of the Ecuadorian embassy where he had asylum. So they broke the law to arrest Julian Assange. Again, on that alone, this case should be thrown out. Broke the law, violated his asylum and diplomatic immunity to drag his ass out of diplomatic treaties. I mean, the charge that they used to drag him out of the embassy, that the UK police used to drag him out of the embassy, was jumping bail on a bullshit charge that was honestly probably mucked up by the CIA and the US government anyway, back in Sweden. Charges that were proven false more than once, charges that have been dropped and were dropped. That was the pretext that they used, or the pretense that they used to illegally drag Julian Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy to ship him off to the US. The whole thing was a coordinated conspiracy between the UK, the Ecuadorian government, and the US to illegally prosecute Julian Assange. So this whole process has been a sham from the beginning. They've gone about this entire thing as if the conclusion has already been predetermined, and they're just going through the motions to make this again a sham trial, to make it look like there's some semblance of justice going on here. But that's not the case at all. If there was any justice, this judge would rule to release Julian Assange immediately. If I'm being honest, it doesn't look like that's the way this is going. Even if they do rule against Julian Assange, I believe he can file an appeal and try to drag out the process and win on an appeal. But this is just one of those stories that is just incredibly... It is so outrageous, and it is so clear that the government is in the wrong here. That part of the story is a big thing of itself. And then you also have the complicity of the media and just the indifference and the callousness from the public that really isn't even paying attention to this. And this is one of the most important trials and court proceedings of our lifetime, because the precedent that this sets and the implications behind this are so wide-reaching. And this is just one of those stories, like I said, it's very black and white. And people have this naive interpretation of our government as just this big bureaucracy. They mean well, but they're just a bunch of bumbling buffoons. Government's broken, nothing's working right. They're failing to do their job, but there is they mean well. That's the naive belief that most people have been indoctrinated to believe, or the view that they have of our government. But cases like this, where you have the people who were right, undoubtedly right, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, exposing the U.S. government, massive document dumps, exposing all the cover-ups and civilian murders, mass murders, war crimes, murdering people on purpose for their own entertainment. That's what our troops, that's what the U.S. military is over there doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's what Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning exposed. And knowing that information, being presented with, they already knew the information before we did. The government knew this information before we did. But even when they're presented with this and the public outrage at how we're carrying ourselves in these foreign countries where we're doing illegal military interventions, when presented with that information and the public perception of that information, what did the government do? They didn't try to clean it up and prevent these things from ever happening again, going after the criminals who were responsible, going after the war criminals who murdered Reuters journalists, who murdered innocent civilians, and then murdered the first responders who came to help them. Did that all on camera laughing about it. Let's arrest them and prosecute them and set an example. Nope, that's not what the government did. Instead, the government went after the people who were exposing the war crimes, who pointed out that, hey, we're covering up and we're protecting war criminals while they're doing mass murder and genocide in other countries, in other people's countries, for the profit of defense contractors and Raytheon and Boeing and Honeywell and Lockheed Martin. That's what we're doing with US dollars. That's what all these wars are about. Those are the people who the US government used a full force of government to go after. They hunted them down, had teams of lawyers come with rationalizations why they should be prosecuted, bullshit rationalizations. Then you have them in custody, you torture them, and the whole time you're threatening to keep them behind bars, maybe for the rest of their life. So, like I said, in cases like this, it kind of shatters that whole naive worldview that the government, it's this huge benevolent bureaucracy that's just tripling over themselves, and they can't do what they need to do to help the public. It shatters that view, and it makes you see the government as a more nefarious actor, as more of a bad actor, because that's what they're actually doing. Their main intent here is to commit harm and to cover up for the people committing war crimes. That is the government's intent in going after Julian Assange, and to prevent people from exposing the government and exposing their crimes ever again. That is their intent. That is nefarious. So you have cases like this. You have instances like the crime bill and this whole mass incarceration crisis. You have the government outright trying to deny people health care during normal times, which is outrageous. But even during a pandemic, all for the profits of the donors in the defense industry. I mean, in the health insurance industry and the donors in Big Pharma. They will deny the public health care. They will let 60,000 plus people die every single year in this country because they can't afford health care. Again, even worse than a pandemic, they will do all that for the profits of their donors. They will help corporations and the rich run out the back door with all the money in the middle of the worst economic crisis in history. And at the same time they're doing that, they won't give the public any cash assistance because they don't want to set the precedent that the government is supposed to provide material wealth to people, poor people in this country. So to prove that point, even though they all believe in MMT, they all believe in it when they want to fund wars and they want to fund Wall Street bailouts and all like that. Blank check for that. But you have to be fiscally conservative and fiscally responsible, and you can't just be handing out poor people money. So all these different things, you have these are deliberate actions by the government. The government is efficiently working towards whatever goal it is that they have in mind. Whatever their end goal is, they are efficiently working towards that goal. And you look around at so many different giant issues, different examples, like here with Julian Assange, where the government, it's not like they're tripping over themselves and, oh, look at these bumbling buffoons who have no idea what they're doing. No, their goal is nefarious. They have nefarious intent. They're the bad actors in the situation. So I think people need to reimagine the relationship that the government has towards them, that the government has towards the public in general. Because this whole fantasy that they're looking out for us, really, even if they can't do their jobs right, they're just looking out for us. That's not the case. Like I said, they have nefarious intent a lot of the times, and they're out on purpose trying to do bad shit for their own interest and for the interest of their donors. And the whole everything around Julian Assange is a great example of that. They went after this man for the fact that he was a good journalist, one of the best journalists of our lifetime. So It was an intentional decision made by the president, made by people in the intelligence community, made by people in the Pentagon and the State Department to go after these people like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, to go after them with everything they got because they're exposing the bad shit that the government does. I think people just need to wake up and realize how hostile the government is towards them. And what you do with that information, I can't tell you what to make of that. But I guarantee your solution or of how to move forward is a lot different if you view the government as what they really are, a vicious, rapacious oligarchy that puts profit above humanity and has violent imperialist intentions around the world, versus a government that's means well, but they can't get it together enough to actually do anything to help you.